Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm looking forward to today's show. I've been looking forward to it for a very long time. It's a tribute, it's a historical tribute, and I don't know what else to say. I'm going to tell you all about it in just a second. But before we get started, I want to say hi to Amnon.
Hello, Marilyn.
Are
How
you
are you?
are you on camera now?
I'm not on camera.
Okay,
Right now.
Amnon's going to be on camera today. For those of you who have
here I
watched,
am on
okay,
camera.
good. So for those of you who have watched us before, listened to us before, enjoyed our show, you might hear this voice in the background, and sometimes it's Amnon, and he's talking to us. He's giving his comments. But today the show is somewhat about Amnon too. So I'm glad he's here. I'm going to introduce my guest, but before I do, please feel free to join our chat. You can put your name, nickname, whatever you like underneath the video on our homepage of the Breaking Free Show. You can call us anytime you want, 919-518-9773. Or you can come in on Computers 2K Voice on Skype. And I'll repeat that as we go on with the show, but please feel free anytime you want. This is an open invitation to have you join us. So today, our guest is Jack Kuper. And Jack Kuper is a child of the Holocaust. He is an author, a graphic designer. He was in television. He's done documentaries. I mean, I don't know what this gentleman hasn't done, but several months ago, and I'm always delighted to have somebody on like Jack. Amnon was telling me about Jack and their experience together back in Israel. And I'm holding back the tears. So I want to introduce Jack. He is an amazing man. I've had a few minutes with him, and all I can do is laugh. So let me bring Jack on. Jack, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been looking forward to it.
Good, me too. So tell us some things about Jack, and then I want to talk about a little bit about Amnon and go from there.
Well, where do I start? What would you like me to
Start. You can start at the beginning. You want to start when you went to Canada and how you met Amnon then? No?
Well, to talk about his stuff.
Okay, talk about the Holocaust. Talk about
the Holocaust. Yes, well, I've had a very checkered career, so it depends who knows me from where. So some people know me only through my first book, Child of the Holocaust, which your audience may remember seeing it when it came out in the States. That was one edition. There have been quite a few editions of this book. And since it was published at first time in 1967, it's been on the market ever since and is still being published and republished. For example, just recently it came out in Holland in Dutch. There's the Dutch edition, and I kind of liked the cover a lot. I thought that was really good.
Wow.
Yeah. A few years ago, the Spanish edition, I was in Mexico at the airport, and I saw a huge display of my book, and it gave me such a lift. Yeah.
So Jack, I want to know about your childhood, but what does it mean to have your book printed in all these different foreign languages? What does that mean?
Well, it means a lot to me because the reason I wrote the book is because it was important for me to remember those who didn't survive. In those days when you didn't know what the next day would bring, people would say, whoever survives, please remember me. Remember that I existed. People didn't want to perish, to die without a reason. It didn't make any sense. And they didn't want to be forgotten. And so when I wrote the book, I didn't think of it as a commercial venture or that it may even be published. I wrote it for my children. So in fact, in the first edition, I dedicated to my wife and my children so they will know. And it so happened by accident or by fluke that the book took off. And till this day, it's being published and republished for the third or fourth time in England this past year. It came out in a new English edition and being sold in all over the world where people speak English. So I'm very gratified about that. Now, you wanted to know about my childhood and what the book is about. Certainly, I cannot go into the great detail, but if I can sum up, I can tell you that unlike most people who write about the Holocaust, this is somewhat different in the sense that I was not in a concentration camp. I do not have a number on my arm. It so happened I ended up being on a farm, and when I came home to bring food to my mother, I found that the whole town had been deported the night before, and I was the only one left. I returned to the farm, and soon after, the woman that I worked for got frightened that she will be persecuted for hiding me or for keeping me. And so I had to leave. She threw me out. And for the next 3 and some years, I went from door to door, farm to farm, village to village, and slowly learned how to lie and cheat and steal. And I assumed the role of a Catholic orphan. I gave myself a fictitious name or many names. I created a fictitious story. And that's how I survived. And the irony of it, the climax of my story, is that by the time I returned to the fold, when the war was over, when I was liberated, and I came back to the city of Lublin, where survivors were congregating, I was placed in a Jewish orphanage. And there, my persecution started all over again because my disguise was so successful in every way, not only in my looks, but the way I spoke, the way I acted, that they did not believe I was a Jewish kid. They thought I was a Polish spy. And so the kids in the orphanage started persecuting me all over again.
Wow. So you were 15 when you ended up in Canada. So were you 11 or 11 years old when you were out on your own?
I was 9 years old going on 10. I might have been 10 by the time I was on my own. I was 9 when I left my mother to go to work on a farm. Yeah.
Wow. 10 years old.
Yeah.
You know, it always leaves me speechless when I hear these stories. They're overwhelmingly powerful for me. And I'm sure for most people, when you get the opportunity, not just to read a book, but to be witness to and connect with somebody who actually lived this horrific existence that you just can't even imagine.
Well, Marilyn, for many years, I lived a very normal life. It's as if I had not been affected by it. And I assumed the reason for that was that I was always able to talk about it and write about it. I not only wrote the book, before writing the book, I wrote plays for television. And one of them was a biographical play called Sun in My Eyes, which was just shown the last couple of years at the Toronto Jewish Film Festival. So I was always able to face it, and as a result, I led a very normal life. Wow. At this stage in my life, I'm 85 years old now. I find that those times are coming back and beginning to haunt me. And I look back and I think, my God, was that me? I can't believe that. And it's as if I've been on hold until now. And now I'm beginning to grieve more than I did before.
And why do you think that is?
I think now that I have time for it, now that I'm retired, I think up till now when I was building a career, looking after a family, have kids go to school, and I was busy. And now that I have a little bit more time to myself, my mind seems to be wandering back to those days. And those scenes keep replaying in my head.
So is it hard for you to do a show like this, Jack?
Not at all, no. I've given many interviews in my time, and I was always happy to talk about it. Yeah, I never shied away from facing it. The moment I survived, I started writing about it, talk about it. My problem was not too many people wanted to hear it. And till this day, there are people who don't want to hear it.
Well, it's very painful. I've it's it's interesting. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of audiobooks in general, and so many of so many of the most popular books are, are fiction, historical fiction, but from the Holocaust. It's just it's amazing to me that and it's important. So Chris has a question. She wants to know if it's you on the cover of your first version of your book.
On the first version, that would be a hardcover, a soft cover.
Well, the picture we have is the one that we have is with the Dutch version. Oh, she said the Dutch version? The Dutch version.
The Dutch version? No, that's something that the Dutch publisher did. That's not me. This is not me.
Okay.
No.
But what about the picture that you sent us with? Is there a little girl in that picture? Did you have
the picture I sent you would be myself and my brother, I think.
And your brother. Okay.
That's in the Warsaw Ghetto.
So you had a brother?
I had a brother, yes. He perished with my mother at Sobibor.
Okay.
That picture was taken in 1940 on the courtyard where we lived in the Warsaw Ghetto.
In the Warsaw Ghetto.
Yeah.
Wow. Whew. And Chris's next question is, she wants to know how often you at age 9 was able to go back and forth between your home and the farm where you worked.
You could go back at that stage. This was in a small town that we had gone to thinking that it would be safer there. And at that time, there was still no ghetto in the town, and farmers were allowed to employ Jews. I went back every few weeks because the woman I worked for, she would go on market day, she would go into town to sell some of her produce and buy some necessities, things like salt and pepper, things that she could not produce herself, needles and thread, matches, things of that nature, oil. And then one of those weeks when I went back, I discovered that the night before the town had been emptied of all Jews.
It's amazing that she didn't even turn you in.
Well, she was asked to turn me in. The neighbors were frightened because if I had been found, then not only would she have perished, but the whole village might have been burned down, or certainly 10 surrounding neighbors. So there was a lot of pressure. And if you read the book, there was also pressure from her son, who was a fascist. He was 18 years old, and he had been taken to Germany on forced labor. And when he returned, he was 100% for Hitler. He thought Hitler was doing a great job, especially getting rid of the Jews. So you can imagine how unhappy he was having me sit at the table across from him.
So when I think when you look back and you, like all these years that you've been able to write about it, I think obviously was in some ways you were possessed to be able to write all about it, to be able to leave this legacy.
Well, I felt it was my duty. I often thought of myself as a messenger, as if you can believe in God or if you believe in a higher up force, then I would have to believe that I survived for a purpose, and that purpose was to tell the story, to carry the story, so people will know what had happened.
And how did you know as a child to pass for a Christian child and not Jewish? How did you know to do that?
It's amazing what experience does. You know, the first farm that I went to and asked for work and told them that I was a Christian orphan looking for work. They invited me in, and I soon learned that they would cross themselves before eating. And at night, before going to bed, they would fall on their knees, and there'd be a night prayer. So I mimicked everything. They went to church, I went to church. I didn't know what they were reading. So I would see the woman next to me, I would see the page number, and I would go to that number and I would mumble to myself as if I was reading it. And so slowly, you learn to mimic the others. You have to be very careful, because it wasn't only what you looked like, it was behavior, how you walked, how you answered a question, whether you looked fearful. I never looked fearful. I knew never to run. So when I encountered danger, I would not panic. For example, one day a truck arrived with German soldiers. They wanted to buy eggs, and you would think that I would try and hide, but I didn't. I went into the cab of the truck and started playing with the horn, and they told me to stop it and threw me out. So I felt that the best way was to face danger. When you were close, people would not be suspicious.
So did you practice Judaism at all during this time, or just surviving?
No, I mean, that's the last thing that, in fact, what happened to me, of course, was that at first it was a charade. I mean, I pretended to be believing in Jesus, and I crossed myself and I said the prayers and so on. But eventually it hit me that maybe the Gentiles had a better God than we did, because it seemed to work for them. And so I made a pact with Jesus. I said, and in a very dangerous moment, I said, if you save me this time, I'll believe in you forever. And so there came a time when I became a believer. I became a believer in Jesus. So that when I entered the Jewish orphanage in Lublin, I still carried a medallion around my neck of one of the saints. And when I sat down to eat with the other kids, without thinking, I started to cross myself before eating.
And did you go back to Judaism, or did you stay believing in Catholicism or Jesus? Or
no, I mean, eventually from the orphanage, in the orphanage, I relearned Yiddish. I'd forgotten the Yiddish completely. I mean, when I came to the city of Lublin and stopped a Jewish man on the street and asked him to help me find someone, he did not believe I was a Jewish kid. I offered to drop my pants to prove it to him.
I was going to ask you if you had been circumcised.
Of course, this was the toughest thing. At many times I wished I'd been a girl. It would have been much easier.
Did you have to hide your circumcision?
Oh, no question about it. I mean, the worst, and then if you read the book, you'll come across the scene where kids in the village beg me to or want me to go swim with them in the river.
I read that.
Yeah, you know, and I kept having excuses that I was busy, I had to work and so on. But the men I worked for said, no, it's okay. I'm going to sleep. You go and swim. And so I was forced to go to the river. And they, of course, would swim and they're naked. I mean, there were no bathing suits in the villages. So the kids would drop their pants and jump in the river. So you can imagine what happened to me. I'm standing there on the bank of the river, and I don't know what to do. And they finally said, come on, what's with you? And so I drop my pants, but I cover myself with my hands. And they said, what's going on? And finally, I cover myself with my left hand and stretch out my right hand and jump in the river. They would be jumping into the river, and out they go and jump again. And I didn't want to come out. They said, come on out. So finally, we had a confrontation, and they said, why are you hiding yourself? What is it that you don't want to show? And I don't know how it came to my head, but I said, have you ever seen our Lord Jesus naked? He was always covered up.
Oh my gosh.
You know.
How old were you then?
By that stage, I was 12 or 13, 12, I think. Yeah, so, and I end that story by saying that if you were a passerby of that river at that time, in the following weeks, you would have seen a group of farm kids jumping into the river with one outstretched arm.
You had good answers, didn't you?
Well, you know, necessity does it.
Necessity.
Yeah.
Makes you brilliant.
Lucky.
Lucky. So when you were in the orphanage, were you adopted?
No, and the orphanage was supported by, was a Jewish orphanage supported by the communist government of Poland at the time. And they wanted us to remain in Poland, and they sent us to school, and they preached socialism, that we would rebuild the country, and we would, and it would be paradise for everybody, that there'd be no anti-Semitism and so forth. In the meantime, there were Zionist groups forming in Poland, and they would send emissaries, secret emissaries to this orphanage. And out of nowhere, some guy would show up in the park, and we would start talking to him. And before we knew, they had arranged a truck to pick us up one night. And we escaped from there and went to another city, the city of Lodz, where there was a Jewish kibbutz run by Hashomer Hatzair. And we were indoctrinated there. We were taught Hebrew and Jewish history and so forth. We were getting ready to go to Palestine to liberate the country.
So how did you end up going to Canada?
Well, in between, we eventually were smuggled out of Poland by the same organization into Germany. And in Germany, we were getting ready to depart illegally for Israel when I found an uncle of mine, one of my father's brothers. And he said, you are not going. He said, there's going to be a bloodbath there. And he says, we cannot afford to lose you. We've lost so many of our family. And he insisted that I go with him to Belgium, where another uncle of mine, another of his brothers.
So, Jack, let me interrupt
Right.
you. So, how did you find him?
This uncle,
Yeah, how'd you find your uncle?
well, as you know, there were these DP camps in Germany after the war. And one of the members of my kibbutz, a girl, had visited a cousin of hers in Munich. He was also a survivor. And it so happened he was from my town. And he told her that when he heard my name, he told her that my uncle had survived and that he's living at a certain camp. And she came back and gave me the news. I jumped on a train and I went to find him.
So your name was not Cooper, right?
No, my name was Kuper Bloom.
Cooper Bloom, and you changed it when?
I changed it when I came to Canada, and people would call me Cooper Bum. or some such thing. And I realized that I had to fit in. And so I first called myself Coop, and then became Cooper, and that kind of stuck. When I went to work in television, all my documents and my checks still came under the name of Cooper Bloom. Finally, I was called into the office, and they said, listen, you got to make up your mind. There's a lot of confusion. So I actually changed it legally, and my kids then were born under Cooper. Yeah.
How I want to go back to you're getting to Canada, but how does it feel to even just change your last name like that? To be somebody and then change your name?
Well, remember, I was used to it. I had many names. The reason for that is when I traveled from village to village, I would change my name in every village so that people would not connect me. So in case somebody got suspicious of me in one village, word would not spread to the other villages. They would not have the right name. So it was easy for me to have a different name. Okay. Mind you, I should say that many times I'm sorry now that I changed my name. I feel I should not have, that it was important to carry through the family name.
And what'd you say about your son?
What did I say?
Yeah, did you just say something about your son?
No, I said it was important to carry through the family name. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that too. I was telling Jack when we started the show, or before, that my maiden name is Lipman, but my real last name was Lipkovich, and now I'm listening to Jack and I want to cry. I don't want to. It's just coming out, I think.
Well, I realized that I made a mistake when I was a graphic artist working for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation television. One of my co-workers was a well-known artist, and he used to have exhibitions in galleries and so on. He was a painter. And he came into my office one day and he said, Jack, he said, tell me, why did you change your name? You had such a beautiful name. He said, I wish I would have had that name. I could have signed myself Yankele Cooper Bloom. Oh, what a wonderful name. And that made me think maybe I'd made a mistake.
Well, I guess regardless of the name, Jack, you're still Jack, you're still still that person, aren't you?
Yes. I am somewhat that person, yes.
Somewhat. What do you mean by that?
Well, we change. I mean, with a change of scenery, change of name, change of diet, change of culture, you become something else.
Right.
Yeah.
So Chris is asking on the chat, when you did go from village to village, did you change change the way you looked? Change your appearance?
Yes, but as I said to you,
right.
For example, I didn't dye my hair blonde, I didn't though at the beginning I was naive. One of the first things I did was to steal a Bible or a prayer book and a cross. And I put the cross around my neck on top of my coat and the Bible in my hand, and I was walking on the road, and a man came up to me and he said, "Jew boy." I said, "What?" He says, "You're too obvious."
Wow.
So I knew from then on, I knew not to be obvious, not just to blend in rather than stick out, to be subtle.
So it's interesting because in the line of work that you've done and all that you've accomplished, you certainly haven't blended in.
But that was important,
Right.
to blend in with the others, to behave the way they did, to answer the way they. In the Yiddish culture, certainly your mannerisms were different. You used your hands a lot. You may have raised your voice a bit. Also, I had an accent. My Polish was not that good to begin with. By the time I was finished, I spoke perfect Polish and could not remember a word of Yiddish. But not only was my Polish perfect, it was the kind of Polish that peasants talk. You see, so I really became that character.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
I'm just in a state of awe listening to you and what a child. I mean, you were a child and what you thought of and how you thought to survive. It's just incredible how to the point of even understanding your hands and your language. It's amazing. So,
I'll give you one example.
yeah.
In the Yiddish, which is taken from German, of course, the letter R, it has, in the Yiddish, it's a resh, or in Hebrew, it's a resh, has a guttural sound. So Jews, when they spoke Polish, they had accents in Poland. And so when it came to the word like kukuruza, which means corn, they would pronounce it kukuruza. Can you hear the difference? Kukuruza.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the Germans, when they caught you, there had two ways of ascertaining whether you were a Jew, if you were a man. One was to drop your pants to see if you were circumcised. The other was to ask you to say kukuruza, and Jews would say kukuruza. So this was a problem for me. I had that accent. So I started editing my speech. I would avoid words that had the letter R. I would try and find other words for it.
My goodness gracious. So you go
ahead.
ahead.
Setting you. Let's do something funny.
Okay. You want to give us a joke?
Well,
tell me about your mother. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Tell me about your mother's name.
Yeah. My mother's maiden name is most unusual. You'll never find it. The name was Huen, which spells Chuen. Huen. And the speculation is that it was probably Cohen at one time, or Huen, or something like that. But I remembered that. And I've not, for years, wherever I travel, I always go to the phone book and try and find Kuper Blooms or Huens. And I actually found a Kuper Bloom in New York once, but never found Huens. So one day, some years ago, I was in Montreal filming, and my wife called me and said, "You better get home right away. You've got a guest here." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Who is it?" She said, "I can't tell you. You'll be surprised. Get on a plane and come home." I jumped on a plane and came home. And I walked into our house, and there was an elderly man sitting there. And he said to me in Yiddish, "You're Yankele." I said, "Yes." I said, "Who are you?" He says, "Kissel." I said, "Kissel? My God. Now, who was Kissel? Kissel was a street musician in our town, and he was a friend of our family. He lived across the street with his parents. He was a bachelor, and he played the mandolin. But his parents were very much against him playing the mandolin, so he would hide the mandolin in a cupboard in our home. And I, as a child, would open the cupboard and I would play with the strings. I remember Kissel, even in the Warsaw Ghetto, the last time I saw him, he and a group of other musicians were playing Brother, Can You Spare a Dime in Yiddish in the courtyard where I lived. That was the last I heard of Kissel, until my uncle in Belgium wrote me and said, I had a visitor here recently at Kissel, and I gave him your address. He may call you. He probably wants money. At any rate, there was Kissel, drunk. My wife said he's drunk everything in the house. She said I had to go and borrow a bottle of scotch from across the street, and he's finished that as well. He was pissed to the gills. So while he was there, I said, Kissel, you remember he and my mother used to sing. He used to play the mandolin. My mother would sing. And I said, you knew my mother's family? He said, yes. I said, tell me about the name, Juan. He said, Juan? You got it wrong. It's not Juan. It's Huan, H-U-E-N. I said, are you sure? He says, absolutely. I knew the family. So I go to the phone book, the Toronto phone book, and there's no Huans. It so happened I had the Montreal phone book, and I looked that up, and lo and behold, I found a T. Huan in Montreal. Well, I was just so excited. I wanted to pick up the phone, but by this time it was like 12 midnight. So I thought I'll wait. In the meantime, we took Kissel back to his hotel and carried him into our car and carried him from our car into his hotel room. And on the way, he peed in his pants. The next day, instead of calling, I sat down and I wrote a letter to T. Huan and told him who I was and that my mother's name was Huan. And I wonder if we are related. A week later, no response. Finally, on a Sunday, the phone rings, and our little girl at that time, Simcha, answered the phone, and she says, Daddy, it's for you. It's a man with an accent. I get on the phone, and the voice says, Mr. Kuper. I said, yes. He says, it's Tommy Huan, your cousin. Are you Chinese too? I said, no, I'm Jewish. He said, that's good too. You come to visit? Yeah.
You are a master storyteller.
Thank you.
So okay, you went to Canada, you lived in Canada, and then you get to Israel. How did you get to Israel?
How did I get to Israel? First of all, I should tell you how I ended up in Toronto.
Okay.
When I came to Canada via the good offices of the Canadian Jewish Congress, who got permission from the Canadian government at the time to bring over 1,000 orphans to Canada, Jewish orphans. And I heard about it, so I went and I registered. And a week later, I was on a boat on the way to Halifax. We had a chaperone, a young lady, who, because I could not speak English and she could speak French, so she was my translator. I was speaking French at the time. And she said, since you speak French, you may want to stay in Montreal. I said, yes, I will. She says, in Toronto, they only speak English. I said, good, I'll stay in Montreal. I said, how do we get to Montreal? She says, well, when we get off the boat, we're going to go on a train overnight to Montreal. I said, oh, will there be places to sit on the train? she said, "Sit, there'll be beds on the train." I knew she was lying because I'd never seen beds on a train. So I didn't argue. But when we got to Halifax, we got on the train, and lo and behold, the black conductors came around, and by pushing some levers and pressing buttons, beds appeared. I couldn't believe that. And only beds, but beautiful pillows, soft pillows, and nice covers. And it was the best night's sleep I'd had since the war had started in 1939. This was 1947. So by the time we got to Montreal, I was so impressed with that. I said, "How long does it take to get to Toronto?" She said, "Overnight." I said, "Will there be beds? Will there be beds on the train?" She says, "Yes." I said, "I want to go to Toronto," because I didn't trust that I would have a bed in Montreal.
Cool.
So that's how I ended up here. Now, how did I end up in Israel?
Israel, and then meeting Amnon. Yeah.
Yeah. So here I was, after working in television for some 13 years and having a very good name and position and having learned a lot. My family was getting larger and my needs were larger. And one thing television did not pay is pay well. So I was offered a job in advertising, which I took, and because I knew something about television, and television advertising was getting big, and I was a genius, they told me. So whatever I touched was winning awards. So I went into advertising, and in advertising, every few months, I'd be offered a better job somewhere else, and I kept moving up the ladder until finally I was paying more in taxes than I had been earning in television. The last job I had was as creative director of an American company called Kenyon and Eckhart, one of the large 10 in the United States, and they hired me to be their creative director in Canada. So here I was. I had a large office, good salary, an open expense account. I could get whatever I wanted. I could travel wherever I wanted, respected and so on, but I wasn't happy. I'd come into my office, my secretary would bring me my coffee, and I'd look out the window and I'd say to myself, "Young Caleb Kuper Bloom, where are you? What are you doing?" And every time I would read or see on television that somebody got murdered or slaughtered or killed in Israel, or a soldier had fallen, I felt that the bullet was meant for me and that I had not done what I should have done, and that is to have gone to fight for the state. So I was terribly guilt-ridden. I mean, here I had a house, I had a farm, I had cars. I mean, I had whatever anybody would need, and I felt that my obligation was to repay what I should have done, and so I picked up my wife, 4 kids, and decided to go to Israel. In the back of my mind, I envisaged my chevra, or the group that I was with in Germany when I left them, that they would meet me at the airport and that we would all dance the hora, and that they would say, "Yankel Kuperblum finally," or Yaakov, they called me Yaakov. Yaakov finally came back, but nobody met me. Even Golda Meir wasn't there to welcome me, you know. So reality then set in. We were given a temporary apartment in what they called a refugee camp, and while there, to get around, I bought a car, and one day on the way back from Tel Aviv, I see a soldier standing there hitchhiking, and the fashion was that you you did not ignore soldiers. You gave them lifts because they had no way of getting around. So naturally, I stopped, and this young, good-looking fellow who could speak English steps right in, and we start to talk. And he said his ambition is to be able to go to Canada to study television. I started to laugh. I said, "Boy, did you ever fall into the right place?" And the next day, he showed up in our apartment, and I think he never left. You know, he became part of our family, and then we were invited to his home and met his parents and his brother Uzi, and they were like family. I mean, there wasn't a Friday that would go by that they would not insist that we come for Shabbat dinner at their place. And his mother was an amazing Iraqi cook, and his father was an elegant man. I mean, we were really like visiting a close family. And so Amnon became part of us, and we feel that way to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Amnon, what do you say?
Well, you know, what can I say? It was meant to be, sort of like it's from above. It's way beyond us. It's something
But
that
sure.
it's you know, I thank God every day for that. I mean, you know, if it wasn't for Jack, we wouldn't be sitting here now. Think about it.
I was just thinking about it. I'm like, so just tell me, did you go to Canada?
No,
So how did you?
no.
So what
There
happened?
was. I remember Jack and Jerry writing me and telling me that there was something about the unemployment and the economic situation wasn't good back then, and it just
No, it was not. Yeah.
wouldn't
When I came
work.
back, when we came back, the economic situation wasn't good. To give you an idea, when I left Canada, when I quit my job, I had maybe 10 offers from other places to go and work for them. And I said, no, I'm leaving the country. When I came back, I couldn't get a job. People were being laid off. But the good part of it was that I was forced then to open my own company. And that's when we opened Kuper Productions Limited. And thank God for that. You know, it was the best thing that could have happened to me.
So, Jack, I love to listen. Listening is my thing.
That's why you're such a good interviewer.
Thank you. You're such an amazing listener. You listen to impulses, you survived because you listened.
I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, but I am aware of the fact that I go by my gut feeling. I go by instinct. I have very little else to rely on except instinct. And I think instinct is the best barometer, that I judge people by instinct on first look. And I judge my moves as well by that. Yeah.
What do you mean by moves?
Well, if someone phones you and you're going to become a millionaire if you invest in them, I go by instinct rather than saying send me documents. I've hired people not by looking at their diplomas or their resumes. Those can be fictitious. I judge them by instinct, or I'll judge them by what they have to tell me. When I used to hire people, I would ask them, what books have you read lately? What movies have you seen? Which ones did you like? Which ones didn't you like? What do you think of such and such? And that would tell me a great deal about the person.
Right. You listen between the lines.
Well, that's the real person, because only too often have I seen people using other fictitious documents to promote themselves. So you also, I think when I used to go from village to village, I had to make a judgment. When I stood in front of a house, I had to say to myself, is this a safe place to go in or not? And my instinct would then make me decide whether to go left or right. I used to think of myself like a rabbit. In the field, I would see rabbits sometimes running, and sometimes a rabbit in the distance would be running towards me and then stop and then look right, look left, and then make a decision which way to go. And that's what I used to do. So luck was with me that I obviously chose the right route. Had I made the wrong move, I might not be here today.
Right. No, I believe that, and I've said this many times, that everything around us is giving off some information, is telling us something. It's very quiet, could be very subtle, but you got to really listen deep to hear what the message is. And you obviously, you asked the question, you got whatever impulse, instinct, whatever you were supposed to understand, and you heard it. And that's what guided you, because it's amazing, your story. So Amnon, so how did you learn did you learn about any of this? No. You didn't learn any, it just, oh my gosh.
No, I mean, I was disappointed that I couldn't go to Canada, but I was sort of like, it was like on a roll of leaving. And after going with Jack on some job interview, and I spoke English, so we spoke English. And I don't know if they didn't know that I was saying Hebrew or whatever, but hearing what the delegates that the interview were saying to each other, I was blown away. I mean,
And what were they saying?
it was, to make it a long story short, overqualified.
That he was overqualified.
Yeah. They were threatened by him.
They were.
Do I remember that correctly, Jack?
What's that?
Oh shoot! I didn't have my mic on. No, I was saying, after going with you and seeing what the Israeli interviewers on the jobs were saying about you to each other in Hebrew, because they thought that I was just part of your family, and I did not understand. I was blown away, because it was always, you were overqualified. They felt threatened. If he's going to come and work for us, we may lose our job. And I'm saying, what in the world do these people think? Here is experience coming into the country, and they are rejecting it. It was, that made it a whole lot easier for me to leave.
I think, Amnon, if I'm not mistaken, you once went with me to Tel Aviv.
Yep.
There was an advertising agency that contacted me, Yuval Tau. I don't know if you remember that. That was his name. And it's in my second book. It's a comedy. I mean, the country was young, and there were all kinds of characters. I mean, basically what I think drove me away was that I came as an idealist. And what I think they were telling me was that I was too late. They did not need idealists anymore. They needed citizens, people who will come and start businesses and commerce and so on. And I had all of that in Canada. Mm-hmm. People would tell me, I would give people lifts, and talking to them, they'd say that they just bought a fridge, and that the fridge is on the balcony because there's no room in their apartment. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? I have 3 fridges at home, and not on the balcony. I have room for it. I have a whole farm with 20 acres. I have an office. I have a house. I have cars at home. What am I what am I trying to accomplish here? And so at the end, it didn't make any sense.
You never wrote the book. I came to Israel to find the horror, and I found and I found a whore.
Oh, well, there's a story about that. You may remember it because I may have told you. There was a fellow who they called the Shaliach, which meant he was the messenger.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who worked in Canada to encourage us to go to Israel. And so he was back in Israel, and he would come and visit us occasionally to see how we were doing. And he told me a story. He said that he has another client who came from England, and he was living in Afula. And when he went to visit him, and he said, "How are you doing?" He says, "Terrible. I want to go back to England." He says, "Why? What's wrong?" He said, "I've been here for 3 months, and no one has come to ask me to dance the horror."
And so, for those of you out there who don't really know what the horror is, I mean, it's a Jewish dance.
It's an Israeli, national dance.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
to me, yeah, it's Jewish.
Yeah.
So, we're almost out of time, Jack, but I'm going to ask you if you would be willing at some, soon to come back so we can talk more.
Absolutely, I'm available.
Good, because there's so much we
Was
haven't.
fun.
Huh?
Yeah, I got some more funny stories.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your stories. And, we've only touched upon this relationship between these two men. And it's extraordinary to me because, before today, they've exchanged emails here and there and whatever, but they haven't really seen each other in 40. How many did we say?
Last
We
time,
haven't seen each other since you came to see me in New York.
1970, no,
74.
74 in New York.
Yeah,
In New York,
right.
yeah. I have photographs of Amnon
Yep.
looking like a beatnik.
Ah!
Yeah.
So listen, the next time, very soon, we're going to do the number 2, Jack, show number 2. You'll send us those pictures.
Oh, please, don't you dare, Jack.
Okay? Jack, you promise? All right, I'm holding you to it.
Okay.
So is this extraordinary to you that this man that you met on the road, this soldier who wanted to be in TV so bad that you were in TV, that begins one of the greatest opportunities for somebody like me to do a TV show in new media without the big networks and all that stuff. Isn't that amazing to you? Can you hear me?
Jack,
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I didn't know you were talking to me.
Yes, I'm talking to you.
Oh, I thought you were talking to the audience. Sorry.
No,
yeah.
no. Isn't it amazing to you
Yeah.
about
it's-
Amnon being able to do this?
Yeah, it is. And I'm very proud of how he was able to pick himself up by his own bootstraps and make a move, and go as far as he has. It's very commendable and admirable.
Well, it isn't.
thank you, Jack.
And I love him too, so he's like a
Well,
brother.
He's easy to love, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He sure is. This has been a wonderful opportunity. And I had been in TV too. I had been in advertising and worked for NBC and worked in independent, sold advertising. And so I have, that's my background. So pretty amazing. So anyway, you have a website, Jack, where you sell your books, or tell us about
No.
some of that.
If anybody, the book in the United States is out of print, but in most towns, I'm sure you'll find it in the library. Look under my name. If not, if you want to buy a copy, look on Amazon or on eBay. And if that fails, contact me, and I'll make sure that you get one.
And that's JACKKUPER.
Yeah. Now, if you
.com
want to
too.
email me,
Yes.
it's Kuper Jack. That's KUPER Jack, JACK, all one word, at yahoo.ca. And you can get in touch with me on email. And if you want the book, as I say, I can make sure that you get a copy.
Perfect. Well, I want to
All right.
thank you, Jack, so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
And we're going to ask you to come back for sure, because I love, 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 love these stories. And I want to do this next piece too. So for all of you out there, I thank you so much for being here. I also have a book on Amazon called In Just One Afternoon, Listening to the Hearts of Men. So this is, that's the first of my series of books. And I think that's part of the reason, a piece of the reason I so love this story between these two men. I just love it. And so I want to thank you again for being here. We have so much in store and so many wonderful shows ahead. And Jack's coming back, and we'll let you all know when he does. So please stay in touch. If I can help you any, contact me, Marilyn, Marilyn, at MarilynShannon.com. And I will see you next week. Jack, mwah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was delightful.
Thank you.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.